Your heart has stood the test. Was it for better or was it worse? If you're standing on the fence with no vision of where it ends, turn around and you will see, you're right where it begins. Don't live all of your life thinking about the way things ought to be. Don't spend all of your life sailing between the river and the sea.
Thank you, Dale Brock and Archie Hughes and the T-Soul Band. I love the words of that song.
Thank you.
And that song really helps us segue into learning more about life and some transitions we go through in life. And I've brought with us today Lee Zulman, who is a life coach. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Stephanie.
I want to know, do you call yourself a life coach?
Actually, I call myself simply a coach. And the reason I call myself a coach is I coach people and they live their lives. They have their careers, they change their careers. They have what they want and they're where they're meant to be. So that's what it's about. It's where you begin, as they said in the song.
Who are some of the people that come to you?
Well, my current clients are all what one would call in the outside world successful people. They're people who've accomplished many things. Somehow something is missing for them. It may be that with everything that they have and they've done, they feel no contentment. That's a big one. It may be that where they are, they're feeling stuck and they don't know how to move. They know where they want to go, but they don't know how to move from where they've been to where they want to be.
For instance, how do they know they're stuck? They feel frustration?
Well, in some cases, it may be as a result of the current economy. Mm-hmm. Some people have never had a chance to reflect. They've been so busy working, and suddenly they're between jobs, or they've reached a certain level and can't be promoted because there's no money for promotions, things like that. So they have the opportunity to sit back and feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it's the first time they acknowledge that they're not comfortable.
That's a big step.
Yes, it is. And between that and actually going to a coach is huge. There are a lot of people who feel stuck or who are not comfortable, not happy, but they don't go out, they don't reach out.
Can I ask you a question? Some of your clients, do you find that it takes them 6 months maybe or a year before they actually call you for help?
That's hard for me to tell, but what I do know is that those who come forward and have that initial conversation often will enroll. But that leap, it's a leap of faith. It requires trust. And it's scary. People don't know what they want, but they don't want to let go of how things are now. So you have to overcome a certain amount of fear to even make that first call. But once they do, it's often a lot easier for them to actually enroll.
So who would some of your clients be? Somebody that is in a high position job maybe and lost their job and has been in that position for 20 years, opposed to maybe a performing artist who used to be in a business and then all of a sudden they decide they're missing out the artistic side of them. What are some of, I mean, without giving names,
Okay, you're wanting some examples.
Please.
I have an engineer who's at one of the high-tech companies, and he's in marketing, and he's from another country. He speaks English fluently. However, there are barriers that he finds in his way to promotion. And so he came to me. That's just one example. I have an entrepreneur who has not been full-time employed for quite some time, and that entrepreneur was wanting to generate more income in a very difficult economy. So those are two examples. I have an at-home mom who's been at home with kids for 5 years and now wants to get back into the workplace. She was highly proficient at her job for 10 years. Right now, she doesn't know how to identify herself and what she's been doing for the last 5 years in words that corporations can understand. So those are some examples.
How would you help some of these people? What are some of the ways that you help? I know you shared with me about the mother. Why don't we start with how you would define and help the woman who's the mother?
Well, each person who comes to me it's very individual. It's an art as well as a science. And what happens with somebody like that is that even though I might have an answer I would give every mother, I have to work with that individual and start where they are. So in her case, one of the things I had her do was observe the language she uses when she talks not about work but about mothering. And seeing herself say something like, "I'm just a mother," right? She values motherhood, but she talks about herself in a way that does not show the value of motherhood. And motherhood is a labor of love. It's labor. It's hard, but it's one of the most critical, most special jobs that anyone could ever have. And you should be able to present that as you would any other high-powered job when you go out there.
So you give her the confidence to feel she's not just a mother, but she is this competent woman who could do all these wonderful major things. And if she goes to go for a job, she says, well, I've been doing multitasking, I've been managing, I've been, all these
Exactly.
things. And her resume changes.
You change your vocabulary and how you present yourself and teach people how to treat you as you would if you were coming from any other phenomenal job. You have a resume and you create a resume.
So do you help her change her resume?
Absolutely. I help with those technicalities, but very often, once a person knows where they're coming from, who they are, and has some connection with a higher purpose in life, it's like where the song said, you start where you are. Once you have that, then it's not that hard to articulate it. To write a resume becomes not such a big deal, especially for someone who's written resumes before.
So how do you get the person to that point of being there? Because a lot of people are trying to be, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to make money, I'm trying. How do you calm them down? What kind of exercises do you give them to come to that point of being, that the light going off that you do so well?
Thank you. Well, the way it starts is we have, as I said, an introductory conversation that's complimentary. Once a person decides they're going to enroll, it's a process. It's not something that can be done in a day. At the same time, I don't plan on creating a codependency relationship. So what I do is I sit with someone for an hour, and that person talks for at least 50 minutes of that hour. And not only am I listening very carefully to what they're saying in many, many ways that are deep, heartfelt, with everything that I have, they are speaking in a way that they may never have spoken before. And they hear their own voice loudly and clearly. From that, I create a program for them. And that program consists of an assessment, an idea of where they're going, so they have a vision. And that relates to what they want, what they've said to me. And then I give them some practices, because it's a small change, as you mentioned. It's a change, but it's a profound change, and it requires that you do things slightly differently from what you've done before, and initially it's not that comfortable, but it seems to work, and people come out, and at the end of it, they can continue on their own. They may want to come back occasionally and have a refresher, but basically they have some tools that they can draw on because they have it already. I'm not asking them to be somebody else.
And you do this all in 10 sessions.
Well, it's so far, it seems to work. I don't say it's magic, it's not. Those people have to come to me, and they have to be honest with me and with themselves. And it's a partnership, but it has to come from them, and they have to be willing to go the whole road with me. And that's 10, sometimes 12 sessions, yes.
So when that person reaches that ultimate goal, they feel like there's magic. Because if you're stuck for a very long time and all of a sudden you've opened all these doors, and I'm going to say you have opened these doors and they've opened the doors by your helping them and guiding them. It's kind of like they're going off to Italy and you're saying, no, Paris is where you need to go, and you're guiding them, and all of a sudden they're in Paris and they're like, this is magic, and I think you give magic, and I wanted the audience to know this about you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I will tell you something, though. Every time I start with a client, it's a humbling experience. I need to remember that I'm not a magician. What I simply do is sit with someone, and occasionally I can be brutally honest with a person. Once in a while, a person will be telling me something out of habit, and I have to remind them.
Can you say a for instance?
Okay. Let's say a person wants success.
Okay.
Right? So the person comes to me and they say, I'm not successful, I want success. And what happens is that success doesn't come because you want success. Success comes because you feel like you are able to be successful. You have it in you. And if you doubt that, right inside, some little critic back there is telling you you're a failure, you're constantly going to trip over that. So it's not about being successful. It's about plugging into that piece of you that knows, that feels
Successful.
that you can be.
Or
successful.
that you are.
Or that you
are. I mean, in the
absolutely.
moment,
Well, not only
success
that,
doesn't have to be making lots of money or getting in the newspaper. Success comes in different forms.
absolutely. And one of the things I had, one of my clients who is, and he said I could mention a title anyway, he's a senior director at a retail company. And what I had him do was I had him walk with his 2-year-old and walk at his 2-year-old's pace for half an hour a week. So if his 2-year-old stopped, he had to stop. Whatever the 2-year-old was looking at or plugging into, he had to. This allowed him to appreciate the world at a very small, minuscule level through a tiny tot who was the most precious thing in the world to him. And it's shifted the way in which he operates as a director in his family in so many ways and with himself. So the practices are very varied, and that's where there's somewhat of an art.
I can imagine somebody getting very frustrated doing like, why am I doing this? What is this for?
That's absolutely right.
And these are the fears that come up that you're talking about.
Absolutely. The first time he did this, it drove him crazy. He was so impatient. It was so hard for him to do this, and it was only after he had done this more than once that appreciation muscle of his clicked. The appreciation of something at a very small level that allows a person who's very successful to feel appreciation for himself and for the people who report to him. So yes, and you're talking about resistance.
Right.
What happens is people come and they say, I want to change. Yeah, I'm prepared to make a change. And I tell them it's a small change, but it's profound. It's not going to be easy. And they say, yeah, and they're prepared to do it, right? And they start off with tremendous enthusiasm, and then life gets in the way. They have a full life. The people who come to me are, most of them, doing pretty well. And suddenly, their reasons, the excuses we make, like you have with your clients, I'm sure, in fitness, like I didn't have time to work out, I had a bit of a cold, this thing happened, and so on. The resistance starts to kick in. Well, that's where the expertise of a coach can help, because I have learned to recognize what it is.
The resistance.
The resistance, and how many masks and how many shapes it can take. And that's when I need to throw it right back at you and say, look what's happening here, and let's examine this. And the person then starts to go, well, yeah, maybe I'll give this a shot, and and we work through it. And then at about, it's after a few sessions, suddenly they start to feel the goodness. And that's very gratifying for my clients.
And for you too.
It is.
Yes.
But it really is about them ultimately.
Is there anything you would like to share with the audience about life changes and just some kind of aid?
Well, certainly, I think at the moment, one of the things that everyone is facing, I don't know anyone who isn't, is the change in the economy. And I have, in fact, on my website, which is, I believe you'll have it up there,
Right.
but on my website, I have my information. You can send me an email, and I'll be glad to send you. It's a sheet that I give to people who, particularly people who've recently lost their job. So if you know of someone who's lost their job and is really feeling down, they're sending out resume after resume, nothing's happening. It kind of gives them a little cheat sheet of what to do every day for a month. And it allows them to feel a little better so that they can maybe turn things around, because they're coming at it, even though life is tough, from a slightly more positive point of view. It's very hard to get a job when you're feeling down. People don't want to employ you if you walk in and you don't look like you're there and willing to go for it. So this will kind of give them something that will get them going, and maybe it'll help them.
That sounds great. Thank you, Lee, so much for joining us.
Don't spend all of your life sailing between